Sci-fi, mech, space opera. These are the hallmarks of some of the most popular and enduring franchises of all time. In video games, there are a few franchises that have managed to pool these motifs together in a successful manner. The brilliance of gameplay versus story, creative world building, and scope are difficult to bring together, but when it works, it can create something really special. One of the games that manages to successfully blend these themes is an obscure title created by an enigmatic developer in the early 90s. Assault Suits Valken, or Cybernator in the West, were released for the Super Famicom and SNES respectively in 1992 and 1993. In the 90s, RPGs rose significantly in popularity for the Western world, especially the SNES, for the early 90s and PlayStation in the back half of the decade. The SNES had a variety of industry-defining titles such as Final Fantasy V and VI, Secret of Mana, Super Mario RPG, and of course, Chrono Trigger. Most of those RPGs were generally fantasy settings and geared towards a younger audience, Nintendo's specialty. Space opera and mech in general, though, tend to be skewed towards an adult audience. The material of hard science or the real robot genre generally lends itself to a narrative that features mature themes, such as more realistic portrayals of war and death. Assault Suits Valken follows the original Mobile Suit Gundam style of story and presentation. Well, to be honest, it does more than just follow it. The story, setting, scenes, and set pieces you experience are more than just a little inspired by Gundam. It'd be fair to say they've been lifted straight from the franchise. The game is not any worse for it though. In fact, I'd say the outright copy pasta works to the game's high advantage. To be honest, there's not even a Gundam game that executes Gundam's own story on the SNES, and it would be almost 10 years before one would come out that could compete with the narrative and gameplay combination achieved in Assault Suits Valken. AS Valken's story hits many of the same beats you'd see in the original Mobile Suit Gundam, with an attack on a colony, an intrepid fight among asteroids, an assault on a hollowed-out meteor, atmospheric re-entry, and so on.
Tell me, sir, I can't seem to slow my tackle down! Commander Sharp, bring the ship and rescue me!
Crown, we can't open our capsule or we'll burn up too. But you did lure the enemy down with you. Death with honor.
The game also features characters dying, and even shows a suicide at the end of it. Those themes are all somewhat mature, and for Western audiences would be quite the shock to see on the SNES. Which brings us to the Western release, retitled Cybernator. In the US and Europe, the game was published by Konami, titan of the 90s gaming industry. The gameplay from its Japanese counterpart is intact. However, some dialogue and cutscenes have been altered. Inexplicably, Konami chose to remove the faces from the dialogue boxes that pop up mid-game, as well as marginalizing or outright eliminating some of the characters. Obviously, the suicide scene was removed as well. Playing Cybernator, you'd still get an amazing experience, but not all the game had to offer. And of course, there are instances where the lack of story in the Cybernator version really can make things confusing, as you'll see in this clip here.
Heat limit, returning to shuttle. No, Major Beldark, my engine. I'm going for it. No good, what is going off? No more time. Well, no more understanding. I don't know what the fuck's going off. What happened? That's what I've been saying.
Fortunately, an English translation of the Japanese version is available to download, thanks to emulation and the hard work of Aeon Genesis Group. From a modern standpoint, some of the changes Konami made seem almost baffling. However, at the time, it might have been a savvy business move for the veteran publisher. In 1992, there was no market for anime in Western culture. In fact, even the term anime didn't exist. Only a few cult followers of the media stateside even knew what it was, and they called it Japanimation. To give greater context, Pokemon wouldn't air in the US until 1998, Same with Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon. Shows like Neon Genesis Evangelion, Ghost in the Shell, Cowboy Bebop. The anime that made anime into a household name. They were almost 10 years away from a US broadcast. Cybernator was released just in 1993. Adding to that, in 93, the largest video game controversy in US history was taking place. Realistic violence and adult themes were being debated in court, and the result would lead to the ESRB rating system. Nintendo was extremely conscious of the controversy and wanted to ensure that any game on their console would not taint their public image. In any case, whether playing Cybernator or Assault Suits Valken, the gameplay and controls are rock solid. The mech designs are clearly inspired by Armor Trooper Votsums. It's particularly evident in the dash maneuver and the punch, which ejects the shell as it extends. Your gun can shoot in 8 directions, and you have the ability to lock your suit into any firing angle for evasion and damage. The Assault Suit, or AS for short, has a sense of weight about it as you move, but it's still responsive. The AS is equipped with a shield which can absorb almost any damage. Also, a vernier jetpack which can be used to hover and or maneuver. These allow for either a defensive approach or a heavier risk-reward style, attempting to dodge enemy fire and give some back. The game does a great job of putting you in various situations where you will have to use all the tools available to you as you progress through the action. There are a few optional weapons you can get to help yourself out as well. They are missable in the game, but absolutely worth getting. This brings up another positive feature of Assault Suits Valken. For the most part, you can move freely within the stages, moving forward, backward, or exploring up and down. Super Metroid wouldn't be released until 1994, and at the time, it was fairly rare for an action game to allow you to move through stages at will. During this time, most games stuck with the Mario way of doing things, and scrolling the screen meant whatever was behind you was inaccessible. Extra exploration is rewarded, as I mentioned, with a few new weapons, but can also net you much needed health energy packs and power chips. Power chips power your weapons up over time. When you get enough of them, your weapons level up, and you'll not only see a noticeable increase in damage, but a different visual effect on the weapon as well. Another small detail that AS Valken adds is partially destructible environments, which outside of Rampage is one of the few times I've seen that on an SNES game. The gameplay and control synergy was so good, it defined 2D mech combat on the SNES. Later titles such as Front Mission Gun Hazard and LucasArts' Metal Storm would outright copy the gameplay of Assault Suits Valken, though it is rumored that some of the development team went over from Masaya Games to Squaresoft to help make Gun Hazard. Speaking of Masaya Games, remember how I mentioned there was an enigmatic developer? NCS Corp is credited at the opening sequence, as is Masaya Games. Masaya Games is the video game brand for Nippon Computer Systems, or NCS. Except when you do any research, it doesn't look like NCS is in the software business at all. Then again, it's hard to tell since they don't even have an official website, at least not one in English. Masaya Games does have an official website, however, all that's there is a sad picture of a roulette wheel and several gambling adverts. An ironic fate for what seemed like an ace developer, especially given that the pachinko machine franchise ruining Konami would be used to publish their games. As I said before, Assault Suits Valken's story borrows heavily from Gundam, unashamedly so. Even still, Gundam's story works extremely well here, and this game did a fantastic job of applying the major themes from the show in a concise, excellent package. The story never gets in the way of the gameplay, and successfully drives the player forward. The game, no matter which version, is a short but sweet title, similar to Mega Man X. If you know what you're doing, you can beat this game in about an hour or so. That said, this game definitely offers up a pretty decent challenge. As most games from the 90s, there's very little hand-holding. Checkpoints are few and far between, and all you've got to beat the game is 3 continues and no lives. The mini-boss, or just the last stage alone, can rinse those continues off you so fast, so you're really going to need your best focus to get through. Adding to the challenge is the game does feature multiple endings. There are a few missions where you'll have to complete additional objectives, as well as survive to get the best ending. Fail even one of those and the bad ending is all that awaits. Of course, I have to point out the soundtrack. This game's OST reminds me a lot of Squaresoft's Xenogears. There aren't many tracks, but what are there are absolute banger tunes. Overall, the awesome controls, great stolen story, music, and gameplay make this one of the best SNES gems I missed as a kid. This is one of the few games that once I finished it, I was ready to start over and experience it again. This is definitely one that's still worth playing today. Finally, Assault Suits Valken is actually part of a franchise. There's an older game for the Genesis called Target Earth, Assault Suits Valken 2, which was Japanese Sega Saturn release, and a remake for the PS2 titled Assault Suits Valken. I haven't played the PS2 remake, but the footage isn't very enticing. None of the games seems like it strikes the same chord as Valken. Fortunately, there is another game that came out in 2016 for the PS4 and PC, which is a remake of the Target Earth game. It's called Assault Suits Lanos. Graphics look impressive, and the controls and gameplay are fantastic. You can pick this game up for about $20 on Steam. Well worth the money. Thank you so very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed that retrospective on a great game lost to time. Until the next time, see ya.